Let's take a few minutes and talk about traps. Traps have a lot of advantages when you're controlling commensal rodents, simply because you have a confirmed kill, but you're also not using any pesticides, and you also know exactly what you're catching, and so you're not worried about any secondary hazards with toxicants that you could if you're worried about children or pets. And nor is there any issues of odor, in the sense of sometimes when you're doing a poisoning program, mice sometimes die where it's inconvenient and they rot, and sometimes people smell an odor. It doesn't happen all the time, but for people who are very sensitive about odor, that could be something where you want to try trapping first to see if you can resolve the problem that way. Well, what type of traps should you choose? Well, here's our common traditional trap. Notice with the metal trigger. This is a snapback trap. Be careful. Always want to wear gloves when you're using these particular traps, particularly when you're in active trapping campaigns. But these traps have been out of circulation for a very long time, so that's why I'm not wearing gloves at the present time. The problem with these types of traps is that sometimes mice will lick off the bait and they don't fire very well. They're just not as efficient as the expanded trigger trap. I'll just take a moment here and I'll set this. You have to kind of fuss with the metal thing a little bit, and sometimes they come in a little bit too tight and too hard, and so the mouse is able to lick off the bait without triggering the trap. It's a common complaint. If you're going to use these particular traps, one way to resolve that problem is to take a little piece of cloth, glue it to the trigger, and then when you take your peanut butter or other type of bait, it will be absorbed into the fabric, and that way when the mouse comes, he can't just lick it off, he needs to bite and tug, and it's the tugging action that will cause the trap to fire. The expanded trigger traps, they're more expensive, but they're also more efficient, and they're better to be used by people who are involved in professional work or for people who want to do some serious mouse control. And the advantage is they are easier to set. You have more adjustments. You can do what's called a firm, which is over to the left side, or you can do a soft, which is over to the right side. There's different sides you can put the trigger bar. But also the advantage is this wider area. It allows you to set the trap up against an obstruction, and you don't even need to put any bait in at all, because the rodent, when he's following the wall, will hit that trigger. It's wide enough and causing the trap. So you can actually set these traps in locations where mice are moving, where there's no bait at all. And so it allows you to use what's called a blind set and offers you a little bit more flexibility. There's also a little compartment where you can put your bait as well. And there are various squeeze baits in the market that you can just put bait right inside there. Or if you want to take a little dab of peanut butter and dab it right in there, or smear it across the whole trigger itself. It provides a little bit more flexibility. But again, the disadvantage of this particular trap is you are paying more for it. And so if you're buying hundreds of them, that can get a bit pricey after a while. It's your personal choice. But there are other traps available besides these two particular versions. Here's one that uses a strike bar. It has a bait cup. It's also relatively easy to set. And so you have your little bait cup, an expanded trigger area, and then a striker bar. What I love about this particular trap is it allows you the ability to release the body of the mouse without having to touch the carcass itself. That can't be done with this, where you're going to have your gloves on and then pry this up and then try to wiggle the mouse off the trap. So this allows you, in a sense, one-hand operation, which is certainly a lot more convenient. But again, this particular trap is going to be more pricey than this one. It also has the ability as well, if you can take a little dab of glue or something, and you can actually glue these particular traps to particular locations. And the larger rat-sized traps can be screwed into place. They'll have actual holes pre-drilled for you, so you can then drill this in places and have it anchored in places where you know mice are going to be going. There's also a fourth trap available. This is called the clamshell trap, and again, it's a little bit more pricey, but it has an advantage of one-hand operation, so that when the trap fires, you don't have to grab the mouse and try to pry it open. You can just simply pick it up wiggle it off and dispose of it as appropriate. And those are some safety concerns and some convenience things that you may want to keep in mind when you're trapping mice. Some of these clamshell traps will have expanded triggers, others won't. There are various varieties out there, but here are 4 different models for you to think about when you're looking to select mouse traps for your particular operation.